now that you all got quiet, I guess we should start, right? Hey, everybody, thank you so much for coming tonight. We're really excited to have Rick Barot here, who is this year's winner of our UNT Rilke Prize. And for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the UNT Rilke Prize, this is a prize that recognizes the best book in the last year by what we call a mid-career poet, so someone who's published at least 2 books previously. And this is Rick's 3rd book that's won. It's a book called Chord, which is up here. You can buy copies out front. I bet you saw copies. If you don't have your copies, make sure you get them, bring them in, and get them signed afterwards. But the prize recognizes a book by a mid-career poet that demonstrates what we call artistry and vision. So I think this book really does both of those things. We're going to hear a great deal about the book from Connor Burke in just a moment. But this is our 5th year giving the prize, and I'm so excited that this is the book that we get to give it to. I think it's a great way of rounding out a terrific lineup that we've had for the first 5 years of this prize. So thank you for sharing this moment with us. So the way that tonight's going to work is I'm going to talk for a couple seconds, Connor's going to come up, Rick's going to read, and then we're going to have this kind of lovely awkward moment where someone comes up and gives Rick a medallion, and he puts the medallion on, and he tests to see if it's real, and we laugh when everybody realizes it's not real, and then he opens his envelope that's supposed to have a check, and there's no check in it, and it feels like, a big joke, but it's actually a celebration. We're happy to do it. So a couple of announcements, though, before we move forward. Cell phones, kill them off. Let's get rid of them. We don't want cell phones to interrupt this great event tonight, so make sure you turn those off. I also want to mention that next week, on Friday, April 22nd at 7:30, over in the Environmental Science Building, we have creative writing faculty reading. So that's something that if you want to see your creative writing professors make fools of themselves, you might want to come to that. So I think that should be a fun event as well. I think now it's time to bring Connor Burke up to say some helpful things about Rick's work. So let's bring Connor Burke up. Connor is a terrific poet, PhD student in our program. So let's welcome Connor.
This evening it is both my great honor and pleasure to introduce poet Rick Barot, whose newest book, Chord, published in 2015 by Sarabon Books, is this year's winner of UNT's Distinguished Rilke Prize. It has also, just this past Monday, won the Open Book Prize at the Penn Literary Awards. Before I say something about this book and what it means to me, let me first give you a sense of Barot's many other accomplishments and accolades. Rick Barot attended Wesleyan University and the Writers' Workshop at the University of Iowa. He currently lives and teaches in Tacoma, Washington, where he directs the Rainier Writing Workshop, a low-residency MFA housed by Pacific Lutheran University. Additionally, he serves as the current poetry editor for the New England Review. Barot has previously published 2 books of poetry, The Darker Fall, in 2002, winner of the Catherine A. Morton Prize, and Want, which was the winner of the 2009 Grub Street Book Prize and a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award. He has received fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Artist Trust of Washington, the Civitella Ranieri Foundation, and from Stanford University, where he was first a Stegner Fellow and then a Jones Lecturer in Poetry. His poems, to cite but a few of his many publications, have appeared in Poetry, the Paris Review, the New Republic, Plowshares, Tin House, and the Virginia Quarterly Review. Perhaps what I find most striking and most invigorating about Chord is how active the mind of its speaker turns out to be in relation to the many subjects explored in the poems, subjects ranging from the limitations of poetry and art, the insistence of memory and history, how we come to define notions of beauty, and the relationship between language and meaning, between sight and thought and the world. Indeed, the very first poem of the collection, Tar, introduces us to a voice that quickly makes plain its dedication to investigating many of these concerns. The poem opens with a description of different tarps the speaker has borne witness to, one laid out to catch olives, one covering a bad roof, one lifted by the air from the back of a truck. But soon the speaker announces that although he could simply go on this way, leaping from one image to the next. Quote, "What I have in my mind isn't the thing itself, but the category of belief that sees the thing as a shelter for what is beneath it. There is no shelter," he then asserts, and later, "there is no tarp for dread, whose only recourse is language so approximate it hardly means what it means." The Wooden Overcoat explores this territory further. This poem starts off with the statement that, quote, "It turns out there's a difference between a detail and an image," and then proceeds by a series of examples meant to demonstrate this difference. Here's one. If a dandelion on the sidewalk is mere detail, the dandelion inked on a friend's bicep is an image because it moves when her body does, even when a shirt covers up the little black sun on a thin stalk. An image, the poem later claims, is, quote, "something activated in the reader's senses beyond mere fact." But despite this now seemingly pinned down definition, it turns out the problem hasn't entirely resolved, as the speaker later still arrives at an uncertainty. When explaining that a coffin was so beautiful, it made me think of Shoshone funerals, where everything the dead person owned was put into a bonfire, even the horse. The speaker then admits that whether the horse in that statement is a detail or an image, he doesn't really know. The poems of this collection depend on this gesture, this confession, the speaker's willingness to turn around on itself and think by questioning its own assertions and capabilities in the very unfolding of the writing itself. The book's title, Chord, underscores the fact that we are meant to consider the individual poems as a whole that aspires toward a kind of harmony, just as do groupings of notes in music. But we are meant also, I believe, to hear in this word's echo its cousin and homonym, chord, as in a length of rope, something that lashes one thing to another. Such images of tying together abound in these poems. A grandmother who can't stop scratching a flush of rashes is lashed down to her bed. A mare is lashed loosely to her handler, while nearby 2 stallions rage for wanting her. Houses are lashed by black lines to the electricity grid and thereby to each other. The Rilke Prize is awarded each year to a collection of poems that, quote, "demonstrate exceptional artistry and vision." The vision of this book is one of a seeing into, a seeing deeply and actively, a kind of interrogative vision that seeks to uncover what binds language and meaning, what binds us to the world, and what binds us to one another. All this, and so much more, I know you'll hear just now. And so without any further delay, please join me in both congratulating and welcoming poet Rick Barot.
You deserve a hug.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. Wasn't that beautiful? Thank you, Connor. It is such a great honor and pleasure to be in Denton to be receiving this prize. You guys can't imagine what a big deal this is for me. So thank you for being here and sharing the moment with me. I also wanted to thank a few other people before I start my reading. I owe this prize to Bruce Bond and Corey Marks, who chose the book. I want to congratulate them on the series and also for your good taste. Over the last couple of days, I've spent some time with the grad students in the English department, and I've had so much fun doing that. They're incredibly smart and eager and thoughtful. So I want to thank them for their time and their conversation. And to Robert Upchurch where is he? There you are. Thank you so much for making me feel welcome. Last but not least, I need to thank Lisa Vining, who she's the person behind the scenes who, at least from my standpoint, has made everything work from a logistical standpoint. So she really deserves our applause. So let's give Lisa some thanks. I don't know of a more detail-oriented person than Lisa, and I'm pretty detail-oriented, so you get a prize for that. I have to say that I love the idea of getting a mid-career accolade like the Rilke Prize because, can you guys hear me?
Could be a little louder.
Yeah? Maybe I'll, how's that?
That's
Better? Okay. I love getting a mid-career prize because I think it says that I have some gray hair, but not too much. And I think the mid-career designation also has something to do with this morning. I had the great idea of waking up early at my hotel and doing some treadmill at the hotel gym. And I twisted my ankle really badly. And I think that's what mid-career means. I didn't die. I survived it. So I'm going to read some poems from Cord, and I'm also going to read maybe 2 or 3 poems at the end, which are brand new, just to give you a sense of where I am now. The first poem I'm going to read is a poem that Connor referenced. It's called "The Wooden Overcoat." And I don't know what kind of audience you are in terms of how much kind of framing you want, but I'm going to do a little bit of framing for each one, just so you get a little bit of an insight into what led to the poem and what I was thinking about. So maybe that'll be useful for you to know. Yeah? And if it's not, just do this. Yeah? So "The Wooden Overcoat," the trigger for this poem was I was reading a poem, a novel by Ivan Doig, who is a Montana, or who was a Montana fiction writer. And the novel was about 19th century mining in Montana. And in there, he introduces the reader to the phrase, "the wooden overcoat," which was a euphemism for coffins during that time period. The wooden overcoat. It turns out there's a difference between a detail and an image. If a dandelion is a mere detail, the dandelion inked on a Brent's bicep is an image, because it moves when her body does, even when a shirt covers the little black sun on a thin stalk. The same way that the barcode on the back of another friend's neck is just a detail, until you hear that the row of numbers underneath are the numbers that his grandfather got on his arm in a camp in Poland. Then it's an image, something activated in the reader's senses beyond mere fact. I know the difference doesn't matter except in poetry, where a coffin is just another coffin until someone at a funeral calls it the wooden overcoat, an image so heavy and warm at the same time that you forget it's about death. At my uncle's funeral, the coffin was so beautiful. It was like the chandelier lighting the room where treaties are signed. It made me think of how loved he was. It made me think of Shoshone funerals, where everything the dead person owned was put into a bonfire, even the horse. In that last sentence, is the horse a detail or an image? I don't really know. In my mind, a horse is never anywhere near a fire, and a detail is as luminous as an image. The trumpet vine, the fence, the clothes, the fire. I'm seeing some people reading along with their books. You're going to notice that there are differences between the version that I read and the one that's in the book. You can ask me about that later. But just be aware that is going on. The second poem I'm going to read is called "On Gardens." And there are a couple of things I want to say about this poem before I read it. The first is that I was born in the Philippines, which was a colony of Spain for about 300 years. So that figures into the poem. The second thing I wanted to mention about the poem is How many of you are familiar with a figure named Vida Sackville-West? A few of you. She's well known these days as having been the lover of Virginia Woolf, who hopefully you will have heard of. But during her time, she was pretty famous herself as a writer. She was incredibly rich, and her estate in England is one that you can still visit. And she has a very famous garden at this estate. And there's a portion of this garden that is designed to, it's designed with plants where all of the plants bloom only white flowers. And so I visited this place, and it's a very interesting, beautiful place. But what's interesting to me is the idea of having a particular place or space that is devoted only to a particular color. And you know, the problem of that, of privileging whiteness on gardens. When I read about the garden designed to bloom only white flowers, I think about the Spanish friar who saw one of my grandmothers 200 years ago and fucked her. If you look at the word colony far enough, you see it traveling back to the Latin of inhabit, till, and cultivate. Words that would have meant something to the friar, walking among the village girls as though in a field of flowers, knowing that fucking was one way of having a foreign policy. As I write this, there's snow falling, which means that every angry thought is as short-lived as a match. The night is its own white garden. Snow on the fence, snow on the tree stump, snow on the azalea bushes. I know it's not fair to see qualities of injustice in the aesthetics of a garden, but somewhere between what the eye sees and what the mind thinks, there is the world. When the neighbors complained that the roots of our cypress tree were buckling their lot, the landlord cut the tree down. I didn't know a living thing 3 stories high could be so silent until it was gone. Suddenly, all of that sky. Suddenly, all the light in the windows, as though every sheet of glass was having a migraine. When I think about that grandmother whose name I don't even know, I think of what it would mean to make a garden that blooms only black. Peonies and gladiolas of deepest purple, tulips like ravens, or a garden that doesn't bloom at all, rocks on a plain of raked gravel, the stray leaves cleared away by monks every hour. If you look at the word garden deep enough, you see it blossoming in an enclosure meant to keep out history and disorder, like the neighbors wanting to keep the cypress tree out, like the monks arranging the stones into an image of serenity. When the snow stops, I walk to see the quiet that has colonized everything. The main street is asleep, except for the bus that goes by, bright as a cruise ship. There are sheet cakes of snow on top of cars. In front of houses, each lawn is as clean as paper, except where the first cat or raccoon has walked across. Each track, like a barbed wire sash on a white gown. Okay. This next poem that I'm going to read is called Looking at the Romans. And the trigger for this poem was that there was a show at the Seattle Art Museum that I saw. It was a traveling exhibition of Roman sculpture from the Louvre Museum in Paris. And there's this amazing room in the exhibit where they had lines of marble busts. So you walk in there and you see like dozens of these beautiful marble busts. And I was walking through there and I was looking at the faces, and lo and behold, I see my uncle's face. And it was a really startling moment to see this sculpture that was, a couple of thousand years old or whatever, and to see the face of somebody that you know. And that kind of slippage of perception was very interesting to me because I realized that my uncle, this little Filipino guy, would never be memorialized in art, right? And so it got me thinking, who are the personnel of empire, and who are the people who are memorialized in art, and who are erased? Yeah. So the poem is really a way of playing with that idea. Looking at the Romans. Looking at the Romans in the museum, the heavy marble busts on their white pedestals, I recognize one likeness as my uncle, the retired accountant whose mind, like a conquered country, is turning into desert, into the dust of dead things. The bust of an old man, big as a god, its short curled hair still rich as matted grass. This is my grandmother, a Roman on her deathbed, surrounded by a citizenry of keening, her breaths coming from the dark of a well, the orange medicine bottles massed like an emergency on the bedside table. The delicate face of the serious young man is another uncle, the one who lost his friends when a plane hit their aircraft carrier, the one who dropped pomegranate fires on the scattering villagers, on the small brown people who looked just like him. One bust is of a noble woman, the pleats of her the pleats of her toga articulated into silky marble folds, her hair carved into singular living strands. She is the aunt who sends all her money home, to lazy sons and dying neighbors. Another marble woman is my other aunt, the one who grows guavas and persimmons, the one who dries salted fish on her garage roof, as though she were still mourning the provinces. Here's the cousin who is a priest. Here's the cousin who sells drugs. Here's the other grandmother, her heart still skilled at keeping time. Here's my mother in the clear white face of a Roman's wife, a figure moving softly among flowers and slaves. This is definitely bummer literature, isn't it? It's a little somber. Poetry is good for that, I have to say. Are we good with sound? Are we okay? Yeah? If there's a problem, just say that, okay? Especially people in the back. I'm going to read this poem called Tarp, which Connor also... you should have told me. It's like spoiler alert. Thank you, Connor. I love your tie.
Thank you.
What can I tell you about this poem? I'll say this about this poem. There's a turn in the poem that you'll hear. And the turn surprised me as much as hopefully it will surprise you. When I was writing it, I got to that moment where the poem kind of does a swerve. And I'm like, holy cow, it's turning. And I found that really wonderful. Tarp. I've seen the black sheets laid out like carpets under the trees, catching the rain of olives as they fell. Also, the cerulean brightness of the one covering the bad roof of a neighbor's shed, the color, the only color inside the winter weeks. Another one took the shape of the pile of bricks underneath. Another flew off the back of a truck, black as a piano, if a piano could rise into the air. I have seen the ones under bridges, the forms they make of sleep. I could go on this way until the end of the page, even though what I have in my mind isn't the thing itself, but the category of belief that sees the thing as a shelter for what is beneath it. There is no shelter. You cannot put a tarp over a wave. You cannot put a tarp over a war. You cannot put a tarp over the broken oil well miles under the ocean. There is no tarp for that raging figure in the mind that sits in a corner and shreds receipts and newspapers. There is no tarp for dread, whose only recourse is language so approximate it hardly means what it means. He is not here. She is sick. She cannot remember her name. He is old. He is ashamed. One of the things maybe I should mention about this book is that I have been talking a lot with the grad students about the idea of structure. And my definition of structure is basically arrangement of information. How is a poem organizing, orchestrating what you know as a reader? And when I was writing this, the poems in this book, and I think TARP is an illustration of that, I got the kind of the crazy notion that I wanted to write poems of different kinds of structures, different kinds of informational arrangement. And the analogy that I started thinking about was, do you guys know chess? Yeah? And so think about each chess piece and how a chess piece, depending on its role and its power, is able to move on a board. Yeah? So a pawn moves basically step by step, right? Square by square. Think about a bishop. It's always moving at a slant, is it not? Or think about a knight that is always moving with that swerve. It goes in one direction and then it shifts to another direction. Think about the kick-ass queen that does whatever she wants, right? So when I was writing these poems, I was literally instructing myself to write poems, channeling the kinds of structural moves that chess pieces would make. Does that make sense to you guys? That I'm like, okay, now I'm going to write a poem that moves like a queen or a knight or a rook. So in a way, these poems, which are so deadly serious, are really just about playing with the idea of chess pieces and how they move. So maybe you want to take the prize back now, right? So like, what is that about? This next poem is called "The Poem is a Letter Opener." And I wanted to write a poem that answered the question, what is a poem? And so this poem is one attempt at that. Let's see, what else do I need to tell you? I think that's it. The poem is a letter opener. The poem is a letter opener, and it is the letter that is answered or not answered. The letter that is held first by the uncle who sorted it on his graveyard shift in the postal service warehouse, after which it became the postman going from box to box, each box a particular face like a dog's. The dog that is also a poem, its eyes dark like the water in a well, its fur smelling like grass. The grass that is also a poem, green and exclamatory in spring, later turning the color of rubber bands. The rubber bands, which are also poems, holding together the pencils, the tip money, the small stone in the slingshot right before it takes flight, the stone that looks like a tiny skull, a piece of the night left in the middle of the day, which is also a poem, starting with its whisper campaign of morning light, the light touching the clean sidewalk, the light touching the sign in the window that says, "No crying allowed in this barber shop," the sign which is itself a poem, like the dusk that comes like a cowl around us, to the sick uncle, to the thieving uncle, to the uncle who sleeps in the daytime, his sleep careful as a tea ceremony, or careful as a poem that is old and full of days, a poem like an old china plate, which is the color of time, the dusk having its supper of fog and people walking through the fog, the fallen leaves in the parks like strewn credit cards, the credit cards which are also poems, like the typewriter writing the letter, one little tooth at a time, one love at a time, in our city of paper and crows. Okay. This last poem that I'm going to read from the book is, at dinner tonight, Bruce was talking a lot about the 1970s. That's his, is that your decade, Bruce? There you go. Well, I grew up in a house that had a 1970s brown refrigerator. And I still remember this refrigerator because it was so old. It was like a dinosaur. Some of you probably grew up in houses with the harvest gold color, that kind of particular kind of pukey yellow. And I think there's also an avocado green, yeah? So someone has written the brown refrigerator poem. Someone now needs to write the avocado green and the harvest gold refrigerator poem. So, brown refrigerator. You don't have to understand it, but you will carry it anyway. Like the couple whose baby died. When they had to move to another state, they took the baby from the years-long ground and brought her with them. They did this again a second time, their memory always tied to its embodiment, new burials for an old grief. In a short film I once saw, ants lifted away the silver and gold confetti from a party, making a trail of suns and moons on the floor. The filmmaker must have put something sweet on the circles, like a painter dabbing little points of white paint to give highlights to an eyeball. Some of the recipes that a friend of mine keeps making go so far back in her family that the recipes are like snapshots of villages and forests, mountains and falling snow. Apples and trout rise up into the night's constellations, a dark without yellow stars. What I remember of childhood sometimes comes down to the brown refrigerator in our house. Its chrome handle was always angry with static, so that now, when I reach for the doorknob or the gas pump, the sharp charge on my fingers is childhood, calling its child back. So I should mention about that poem that, did you guys listen to This American Life with Ira Glass? Yeah? So many years ago, there's a story in there that I mentioned in here, that there's a young couple who had a baby, and the baby died, and the husband got a job in a different state, and they had to make a decision about what to do about the baby's remains. And so they made a decision to have it be disinterred, I think that's the phrase, and bring it with them to where they moved. A few years into living in that new place, it happened again in the sense that the husband got another job somewhere else, and they once again decided to bring the baby with them. And I think that story just lodged in my mind like some sort of weird shrapnel that was in there. I'm like, what does that mean? Why would people do that? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What is that about? So I thought about that This American Life story for years until these other things started to congregate around that story. And then this poem happened. So there. Thank you, Eyreglass. I'm going to read now about 2 or 3 poems from the new manuscript that I'm working on. Just to give you a sense of where I've gone since my prize-winning volume. Let's see. The first poem I'm going to read, some of you will be familiar with the famous sonnet by Keats called On the Grasshopper and the Cricket. And it has a beautiful and very memorable opening line, which is, the poetry of earth is never dead. It's a beautiful poem. If you don't know it, look it up. I wanted to write a poem that was in dialogue with that one, but I wanted to write a double sonnet. And I wanted to write a poem that was about a completely different subject. The Grasshopper and the Cricket. The poetry of earth is a 90-year-old woman in front of a slot machine in a casino in California. She's wearing a gray dress, her sharp red lipstick in 2 lines across her mouth, put there by a daughter. Like Gertrude Stein's, her hair is cut close. Nearby is her wheelchair, painted blue like a boy's bicycle. It is a weekday in March. The casino is the size of a hangar that could house a dozen airplanes, but it is thousands of machines that fill the eye, an event of light and color. The sentences she now speaks are like the sentences of Gertrude Stein, but without the ironies of art. Time is like a compressed accordion, the farthest points now near, more present than the present. Waiting, I am at the food court, reading a magazine article about the languages that the world is losing, the languages spoken only by a few remaining people, or by one remaining person, or lost completely, except for the grainy recordings in archives, mysterious as the sounds made by extinct birds. The reels on her slot machine spin, their symbols never matching. She is playing the 1-cent slots, and her money will go far into the afternoon. And because waiting is thinking, I am thinking of the eternity that Keats writes about in his sonnet about the grasshopper and the cricket, ceasing never in the hedges and in the meadows, in the evening stove, the grasshopper of summer, the cricket of winter. The next poem I'm going to read, you all know Louis Vuitton? Of course, right? There's probably Louis Vuitton in the room. Yeah? Well, this is an ode to Louis Vuitton. And the poem is called The Girl Carrying a Ladder. The Girl Carrying a Ladder. On the same day, I read about the luxury goods company that has produced a punching bag you can buy for $175,000. I see the photograph of the Palestinian girl who carries a ladder with her each morning when she goes to school. To scale the wall of my own understanding of why a punching bag would cost that much, I have to think about why I'm attracted to that punching bag the way some people are attracted to pink kittens, or the way some people are attracted to camouflage, or the way some people are attracted to their gods. I want that punching bag the way the girl carrying the ladder wants to go to school. Relentless, single-minded, and absurd. Carrying the ladder that is twice or 3 times as tall as she is, leaning the ladder against the wall that separates her from her school, the girl goes up the ladder as though it were something she did every day, which she does. When I think of a punching bag, I think of sex. When I think of a ladder, I think of picking apples. When I think of the girl carrying the ladder to go to school, I think of my neighborhood's girls carrying pink camouflage backpacks, not knowing about the armies the camouflage stands for. The logo of the luxury brand is printed all over the punching bag the way camouflage is all over us. Camouflage bed sheets, camouflage cell phone covers, camouflage shirts in neon colors that everyone wears, even the people who vote against guns. We live in paradox and we prosper. We live in paradox and we thrive. What I can't figure out is how the girl deals with the barbed wire at the top of the wall she has to go over, or what the ladder weighs, or what she does with the ladder when she gets to school. Does she put it against the wall with the other ladders, the way kids put their bikes in bike racks at school? What I can't figure out is why 2 men who look like gods would want to break down the wall of each other's faces, knowing there is only blood on the other side, or why apples are the fruit children bring to their teachers, and why it isn't coconuts or grapefruit, or why the neighborhood girls, on their way to school each morning, carry backpacks that are so heavy it looks like they are carrying the world. So my poetry does not get more optimistic as I get older. But that is the world we're in. This last poem that I'm going to read is called Ode with Interruptions. And what I need to tell you about it is that I grew up in Oakland, California, and my parents have lived in the same house, the house that I grew up in, for about 40 years. And it's very interesting to visit there, which I do all the time, because the house feels very haunted to me. But it's not haunted by people or stories that I don't know. It's haunted by my own previous lives, which is a very strange haunting to feel. So that really is what the poem is about. Ode with Interruptions. Someone is in the kitchen washing the dishes. Someone is in the living room watching the news. Someone in a bedroom is holding a used stamp with tweezers and adding it to his collection. Someone is scolding a dog, barking now for decades, a different dog for each of the decades. Someone is reading the paper and listening to a baseball game on the radio at the same time. At the base of the altar, you drop some coins into a wooden box, and the lights reveal the vast, worn painting in front of you. The holy subject of the painting is illuminated for a few minutes before it is dim again. There are churches all over Italy where you can do this. The smell of incense, the smell of stone. Someone is taking the ashes out of the small cave of the fireplace. Though this might have been 100 years ago, when the house was new and we didn't live in it. Someone is writing a letter on thin blue paper. Someone is putting down the needle onto a spinning record, just so. On the couch, someone is sleeping. Upstairs, someone is looking into the bathroom mirror. While we were waiting for my sister's surgery to finish, I walked around the hospital and came across a waiting room that had an enormous aquarium. The black fish with red stripes, the yellow fish with blue stripes, the triangle fish, the cylinder fish, the little orange schools, and the cellophane glints of their quick turns in the box of water, among arrangements of coral in that city of bones. Someone is walking down the creaking staircase in the dark, a hand sliding on the rail. Someone is on the telephone, which means nobody else can use it for another hour. Someone in his room is doing homework, me or someone almost like me, 20, 50 years ago. Someone is reading in her room. Someone is talking to the gray wall. Someone is talking to the gray wall. In summer, on a hot afternoon, someone peels at a corner of wallpaper and sees only more wallpaper underneath. I used to think that to write poems, to make art, meant trying to transcend the prosaic elements of the self, to arrive at some essential plane of the self where poems were supposed to succeed. I was wrong. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Rick.
Should I be here or somewhere else?
No, this is okay. I'm not quite sure myself.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to be able to present Rick with the Rilke Prize in its 5th year. And before I do that, I should say that we have with us our former chair, who is now Dean, David Holdeman, who was instrumental in creating this $10,000 prize, which Rick has won. And so, David, thank you to you for your vision for that these many years ago, or several years ago now. And I guess in the year in which you've won, it gives me great pleasure to know that you've won a Guggenheim, and you've been a finalist for the LA Times Book Prize, and won the Penn Open Book Award. But
I twisted my ankle.
And you twisted your ankle, and we were first with the Rilke Prize. So it's with great pleasure that I present to you, Rick, an envelope representing that check. There you go. And also I will present to you a medallion that we give the Rilke Prize winner. So please join me in congratulating him.
Thank you very much, Barot. I had so much fun here. Yeah.
I think Corey's going to come. No.
We need to see you wear it, of
Oh,
course.
goodness. Texans are so vocal.
They wanted to talk the whole time, I'm sure. Well, we have one more prize that we want to celebrate tonight. So I want to bring Chelsea Wagner up. We gave Rick this prize, and then we made him work. So we asked him to judge our Fortman Academy of American Poets Prize. And this is a great prize program that we've been involved with now for 4 years. And it's Academy of American Poets is a great national organization that sponsors awards at about 200 universities and colleges. And this prize gives the winner $200. And Rick chose Chelsea's poem, The Spinning Place, this year as the winner. It's a terrific poem, and Rick had very lovely things to say about it. and I think it's a well-deserving poem. And it's the second time Chelsea has won this award. So, so congratulations to Chelsea. I don't have anything for you to wear, but I have that for you. And I think you should have a picture.
That's
With
fantastic.
Rick, so.
Can I win this twice too?
Yes. All right, thank you everybody so much for coming. Go buy books and come up and get your book signed. So thank you again.